diving in again. Today, it's all about how we make those big decisions, not when there's a boss or a clear leader.
Yeah.
But when it's, equals, like partners, really close friends, that kind of thing.
Right, that pure dynamic.
Exactly. We're using this cool YouTube video, it's by Coach Mediantes, as a jumping off point. They use this vacation scenario, figuring out where to go. Plus, we'll be riffing on that, thinking about how this all applies beyond just trips. But first, I got to ask, when you're making a big decision with someone you consider an equal, how does that usually go down?
Good question. It's interesting, right? Because this whole idea of equals making decisions, it's its own special thing.
Totally.
It's different from how decisions get made in families or workplaces, where there's that built-in power difference. Lots of other factors at play there. Might have to be a future deep dive, actually.
I'd listen to that. But yeah, sticking with those equal relationships for now, Coach Mediantes, in this video, they kick things off with this classic vacation dilemma. One person's all about the mountains, the other's a total beach bum.
Yep, classic. It highlights that tension, between what you want and what makes sense when you're deciding with someone else, especially someone you see as an equal.
For sure. And then what's cool is they lay out these 4 different approaches, not necessarily recommending them, but more like these are the patterns we often fall into.
Yeah.
Recognizable, right?
Oh, yeah, for sure.
So first up, we've got halo coyote, which basically translates to do what I say.
Right.
And picture this. One person just steamrolls the decision. The other person, they kind of just suffer in silence, maybe even end up resenting the whole trip. Not exactly a recipe for vacation bliss, is it?
Not really. And it often backfires in a practical sense, too. If you've pushed someone into something they hate, are they going to be all that helpful with the planning or be excited once you're actually there? Probably not. You just end up with this, surface level decision.
Yeah, no real buy-in underneath. Then on the flip side, we've got halo coyote, which is essentially do what you say. This is that whole, avoiding conflict at all costs, going along with whatever to keep the peace.
Right. And this one, it can be tricky because it's not always about the other person being aggressive,
Okay.
Sometimes it's genuinely someone who just struggles to say what they want, especially if they're worried about causing tension. But the problem is, it creates this imbalance where one person's desires are always taking priority.
So you could end up with one person planning this super elaborate mountain itinerary, totally oblivious to their partner, silently wishing they were on a beach somewhere.
Exactly. And Coach Mediantes actually calls this combination the fatal one because on the surface, it looks harmonious.
Like everything's fine.
Right. But it's one person getting their way while the other's unhappy. No one's really owning that decision together.
So we've got domination, we've got submission, neither sounding super healthy so far. What's next?
Par la diff, which basically means split the difference.
Compromise.
On the surface, it sounds reasonable, right? Everyone gets a little of what they want. Maybe you do half the vacation in the mountains, half at the beach.
Or you alternate years, like this year mountains, next year beach.
Yeah.
But is that really satisfying?
Right.
It feels like you're always just settling, never really getting fully excited about the trip.
Yeah, and the video points out that par la diff can actually lead to people, starting with these exaggerated demands.
Because they know they'll have to meet in the middle.
Exactly. So it becomes this weird strategic bargaining thing instead of finding something you both genuinely love.
Okay, so maybe not the win-win, it seems to be.
Yeah.
All right, 3 down, 1 to go. And I have a feeling, based on where we're at, this is the good one. Consensus.
Yes. But it's important to be clear about what we actually mean by consensus, because it's not about finding the most boring middle ground that no one hates.
That's just watering everything down until it's the least objectionable choice.
It's about finding a solution where no one feels like they had to sacrifice something that really mattered to them. Coach Mediantes uses this great example. Instead of mountains or our beach, what if you find a place with both? Like a mountain town that's also got a lake for swimming, or a coastal region with awesome hiking trails.
Right. That starts to sound a lot more appealing. So it's about getting creative, right?
Yeah.
And finding that sweet spot where both people's needs and preferences are genuinely being considered.
Exactly. And that's where things get interesting. How do you actually get to that consensus? Something that really jumps out from both this video and that extra article we found, it's how much this equals thing really matters.
Yeah, it's a whole different ball game from when there's a clear power dynamic, like you were saying before. Why does that make such a difference for which decision-making style actually works?
Well, think about it. In a boss-employee situation, it's usually the boss's call whether the employee agrees or not.
Right, it just comes with the territory.
Exactly. Hala coyote might actually be the norm there. even if it's not ideal.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
But when you're talking about equals, that top-down thing just doesn't fly.
Nope. Everyone's got an equal stake in the outcome.
So everyone's got to feel heard and respected?
Exactly. And what I found really interesting is that both the video and the article, they're pretty clear that consensus is the only style that actually works long-term when it's equals making the decisions.
Wait, only one?
Yeah.
I mean, the others sounded kind of plausible, even if some had their issues. Why even bring them up if they're not the right way to do things?
That's what I liked about Coach Mediantes. He gets it. He says he describes those less effective styles, not because he's recommending them, but because they're so common.
Ah, so it's about recognizing them.
Exactly. People use them all the time, probably without even realizing it. So the more we understand those patterns, we can spot them in ourselves, spot them in others, we're less likely to fall into those traps.
It's like beep, 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 warning. Approaching Halo Coyote territory. Course correction needed.
Exactly. It's not about shaming anyone, just helping everyone become more intentional, right? More aware of how we're making these decisions together.
So it's not that the other styles are bad. It's just that they're not the best fit for this specific situation.
Right. In a different context, they might be fine. Like imagine a surgeon in the middle of a operation. They don't have time for consensus.
Sure.
But in our daily lives, especially with people we're closest to, consensus is where it's at. It's the one that lets everyone feel heard, feel respected, and like they're truly part of that final decision.
And it's not even about everyone getting exactly what they want. Really.
No, it's more nuanced than that.
It's more about finding a solution everyone can live with, where no one feels like they had to give up something super important to them. And that's where those 4 rules come in, the time boxing, backup plans, all that. They give you a structure to actually make consensus happen. Okay, so let's break down those rules a little more. We touched on them, but I think it's worth really exploring how each one works and how they all fit together to make this whole decision-making process smoother and hopefully a lot more satisfying.
Definitely. And what's cool is, even though the vacation scenario is a good example, these rules apply way beyond trips, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Any decision you're making with someone you see as an equal, from figuring out what's for dinner to those bigger things like finances, parenting choices, it all ties in.
So let's start with this time boxing thing. Seems kind of counterintuitive, right? Putting a time limit on decision-making, especially when you're aiming for consensus. Why is that so important?
Because without a time limit, you know what happens, right? Those discussions can spiral. They go on forever, people rehashing the same points.
Like those meetings that should have just been an email.
Exactly. Time boxing forces everyone to be more concise, get to the heart of the matter. It adds a bit of urgency.
And it acknowledges that sometimes you might not reach a decision in that time.
And that's where the backup plan comes in.
Smart.
Having that alternative decided ahead of time, it prevents that whole stuck in limbo thing. So if you hit the time limit, still can't agree, boom, you know what to do.
So what could that look like?
Flip a coin, maybe a trusted friend decides, or just table it for later when you've had time to cool off.
I like that. So it's almost like having that safety net makes the whole consensus process less stressful.
Right. And it reinforces that it's okay if you don't reach consensus every single time.
Sometimes it just doesn't happen.
Exactly.
All right, so we've got the time limit, backup plan.
Yeah.
What about openness and curiosity? How do those fit in?
This one's all about going into the conversation, genuinely wanting to understand the other person's viewpoint.
Right.
Being open to solutions you maybe hadn't even thought of before. Letting go of those preconceived notions.
Really listening to what the other person values.
Exactly. And it takes vulnerability, too. Being willing to share what you need, even if it seems small or silly.
Because sometimes those small things can be a big deal.
Absolutely. And it's amazing what can happen when you approach it with that openness. You might find common ground you didn't know was there, or come up with a solution even better than either of you imagined at the start.
Love that. Okay, time box, backup plan, openness and curiosity, and then we've got the veto power. This one feels a bit more, I don't know, heavy duty.
It does, but it's really about making sure everyone feels safe, even in this consensus-based approach. It means anyone can block a decision if it goes against something truly fundamental for them.
Right, so it's not about being bossy or demanding. It's about being able to say, hey, this just doesn't work for me, and here's why.
Exactly. But like we said before, gotta use it wisely.
Can't just be like a random no every time.
Yeah. Coach Mediantes is clear that vetoes should be rare, only for things that would really cause harm or go against deeply held beliefs. It's more about protecting what's truly important to you.
And it forces you to communicate well, too.
Right.
If you're going to veto something, you got to explain WHY.
It can actually make your relationship stronger even when there's disagreement.
Because you're being honest with each other.
Mm.
Okay, so there we have it. Time boxing, backup plans, openness, and veto power. Those are our 4 consensus rules. But how does it look in real life?
Yeah. Let's move past the vacation example. Imagine a couple trying to figure out chores. Who does what? So let's say one person loves cooking but can't stand doing the dishes. The other's fine with cleaning up, but meal planning stresses them out.
I see where you're going with this.
Using consensus, they could say, all right, 1 hour to talk this through. They'd agree on a backup, like maybe they alternate weeks being in charge of dinner. And then it's all about that open, curious mindset.
So no more that, I always do the dishes resentment building up.
Right. They can brainstorm, maybe cook together sometimes, order takeout other nights, even try those meal kit things to keep it simple.
And what if one of them just hates a specific chore, like taking out the trash?
Veto power. But remember, responsibly, explain why. It's not just about avoiding what you dislike. It's about finding a solution that works for both of you.
Okay, chores, check. What about something even trickier, like money? Couples making financial decisions.
Ooh, good one. Let's say you've got a saver and a spender. Instead of arguing about every purchase, they use consensus to build a budget they both can get behind.
So they'd set aside time to talk, figure out their goals, what they're worried about, have a backup, maybe talk to a financial advisor if they're really stuck, and then that open, curious approach again.
Right. Maybe the spender realizes, hey, I can cut back on some things if it means we can afford that awesome vacation. And the saver's like, okay, some splurges are all right as long as it fits our values.
Finding that balance, right? Where both people feel good, like their needs are being met and they're working towards the same thing. And what I love about consensus, it's not just about the decision itself. It's about how you get there.
You nailed it. It's building trust, being honest with each other, learning how to disagree without it turning into a fight. Those are skills you need everywhere, not just for decisions.
So for everyone listening, even if you don't nail consensus perfectly every time, that process itself, being open, curious, respecting each other, that has a huge impact on your relationships and probably leads to better decisions overall too.
It's like shifting from that me versus you to we're in this together. I think we all need more of that, honestly, whether it's vacations, chores, money, whatever.
So as you head back out into the world, our challenge for you, next time you're facing a decision, big or small, and you got to agree with someone who's your equal, try consensus.
Use those 4 rules, see what happens.
You might be surprised how much smoother, how much more satisfying it can be. And hey, if you're feeling brave, come back. Tell us how it went.
We want to hear the good, the bad, what you learned. We're all figuring this out together.
Until next time, fellow deep divers, keep exploring those ideas, keep asking those tough questions, and keep those consensus conversations going.